welcome back to the Real News Network. We're in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and at MIT with Professor Noam Chomsky. Thanks, Noam. So let me paint a possible scenario, possible picture here. The global financial system is completely collapsing outside of the United States. The Eastern Europe economy is in shambles. Ukraine is in shambles. Pakistan, if you move into Asia, the meltdown globally is tremendous, and a lot of the worst consequences of this crisis is being shifted into various parts of the world, and capital drawn into the United States as people buy T-bills and such. But if this stimulus package doesn't work, if the banking reform doesn't work, and people start to lose confidence in the American T-bill, and even if they don't, this unemployment spiral can turn into a very severe crisis, and many people are suggesting it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. What's the political fallout of that in the United States? And let's go back to a conversation you and I had just before the last election, where you essentially said vote for Obama, but I don't think you said hold your nose. You said do it without illusions if you're in a swing state. Are people who are disturbed by the current situation, both on the progressive side and also you find this a lot of concern also on more traditional conservatives and libertarian conservatives, are kind of caught in some ways the same way they were before the election, which is how vigorously do you critique the Obama administration? At the same time, it's in this fight with the Republicans trying to block any kind of measures that are at all even have any kind of progressive content to them. And then look ahead 4 years or 8 years. If this whole Obama presidency is not successful, 8 years from now, you could have McCain, Palin times 10. And we could be looking at a kind of right-wing administration that might make the Bush-Cheney administration look benign.
Yeah, so there are undercurrents in the population where it kind of has a feel of late Weimar Germany sometimes. A mass of people who are suffering, don't understand what's happening to them. We're hardworking. We're listen to the talk shows. We're white, God-fearing, hardworking Americans. Everything's collapsing in our lives. Who's doing it? We'll find somebody who's doing it. But rather familiar. It's worth remembering that Germany went from being the peak of Western civilization in the arts and the sciences and democratic practice in the 1920s to the depths of human history within 10 years. And it was not identical, but kind of similar phenomena were involved in this, sometimes called descent to barbarism. It can happen. I think the only attitude you can take is support the measures critical support of measures that seem necessary to patch things up, but at the same time sustain critique. You mentioned the global impact. It's already beginning. China, for example, has just proposed quietly that there should be a shift away from the dollar as reserve currency. There should be an international reserve currency, actually of the kind that Keynes proposed 60 years ago, but was never implemented. And they have a big stake in this. They have a huge amount of capital tied up in the United States. If the dollar declines, they're in trouble, and they can't withdraw it or they lose their market. So, and those moves are surely going to continue, which may lead to a shift in the international economic structure. It's worth stressing that the United States is by no means suffering the worst. In fact, Europe's in worse shape than the United States. The U.S. has natural advantages. Europe, for example, can't make unified plans. There's internal conflict, national conflicts that prevent large-scale planning. The United States solved that problem during the Civil War, but so it's likely that if these current proposals more or less keep things hanging together, as they may, maybe within a year or two, the United States may well emerge in a position of relative power that's not very much unchanged, except that there are now many pressures. China's the most striking, to diversify the structure of the international economy. Also Latin America, which was the traditional backyard of the United States has been, for the first time in its modern history, moving towards independence and integration and South-South relations and so on, which does give a more diverse, complex economy. But the main action, I think, will remain here.
And you think it is possible that this thing will patch together in a couple of years? I mean, a lot of the predictions are from many economists on various ends of the spectrum are predicting this thing to unravel.
On the other hand, if you look at the actual, kind of money manager community, they don't like what's happening, but they are expecting a revival within a year or two.
Of course, they didn't get it so right.
No, they had everything wrong.
They had everything wrong before.
But so did almost everyone else. I mean, the economics profession has made, the economics profession, financial journalists, corporate managers and so on made just colossal mistakes. Like, for example, not seeing the housing bubble. I mean, for 100 years, housing prices have pretty much tracked economic growth. All of a sudden, they shot out of sight. I mean, how can people not see that? But overwhelmingly, they didn't. There are a few exceptions.
Yeah, there were a few. Yeah.
But not a lot. But and that's an astonishing. I mean, it's understandable that the banks didn't see it. They didn't care. As long as you can securitize mortgages, you can keep making money, even if housing prices go into the stratosphere.
Après-moi la deluge.
And and then you count on the public to bail you out. I mean, take Citigroup's a perfect example. Robert Rubin, who was the Secretary of Treasury, he kind of steered through Congress the elimination of the Glass-Steagall Act, which protected commercial banks from risky investments. As soon as it went through, he quit the government, became a director of Citigroup. They profited enormously from these new possibilities. And then when it crashed, he's out with his money, and the public steps in and bails him out.
But even if they patch this together, isn't it likely to be quite temporary, and the house of cards continues to fall? And given that purchasing power has been so based on debt.
It has, but look, I mean, if there's a stimulus, if the economy is stimulated, the debt can be overcome. I mean, take, say, the Second World War. That was the greatest growth period ever. During the Second World War, there was a semi-command economy. Industrial production almost quadrupled and totally ended the Depression. There was an enormous debt, but the economy had grown so. And then with the continued reliance on the state sector for dynamism to sustain the high-tech economy, what's happened in the last 50 years, that debt was paid off. We had the biggest period of peacetime growth ever. So it can be overcome. But there are, there's a big elephant in the closet, and that's the healthcare system. If current tendencies continue, healthcare is going to overwhelm the federal budget. There's another big elephant, the military budget. That's just a huge, crushing component of the economy. Now, here's a kind of case where you have to both support current measures and sharply critique them. So Obama's health reform proposals are being criticized because they're going to add to the deficit. But if they were done properly, they would reduce the deficit. As long as there's good reason why the U.S. healthcare system is the most inefficient and costly in the industrial world. I mean, it's twice the per capita costs of other countries, has some of the worst outcomes. It's the only privatized system. And privatization introduces a huge amount of bureaucracy, administrative costs, surveillance, and so on and so forth, which is very expensive. It's probably hundreds of billions of dollars a year. For decades, the public has wanted a national health care system, something like what's now called Medicare Plus. Now, here's a case where democracy just doesn't function. What the large majority wants has been just off the agenda. I mean, now it's beginning to sort of appear around the fringes. But if there was a move towards what the public wants, that ought to reduce healthcare costs substantially. But it's considered kind of politically impossible. You can't really tamper with the privatized system. Or just take the cost of drugs. I mean, the cost of drugs is probably 2 or 3 times as high here as in comparable countries. It's because of the power of the pharmaceutical corporations.
Well, in the next segment of our interview, which I know has to be the last because I know you have to go, let's talk about what's the shape of the oppositional movement in the United States and what do you think people should do? Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Professor Noam Chomsky.
There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news, but there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the real news every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.